Number 1, what is your name, please?
My name is Ed Edwards.
Number 2.
My name is Ed Edwards.
Number 3.
My name is Ed Edwards.
And here is the extraordinary story of Ed Edwards. I think you'll find it profitable. It says, I, Ed Edwards, was once on the FBI's list of the 10 most wanted criminals in America. Now I am a respected citizen in my community. Here's the story of my dramatic turnabout. As a young boy, I felt that the only way I could gain any recognition was to steal. Eventually, I committed armed robberies, impersonated a federal officer, and was sought for questioning about a double murder. I spent time in the federal penitentiaries in Leavenworth and Lewisburg. It was at the latter prison that I started vocational training and very slowly began to realize that I could still be somebody and return to my rightful and legal place in society.
This is a clip from the American television competition panel show To Tell the Truth, which began in 1956. There have been tweaks and adjustments to the show over its runtime, but the basic premise is this. There are 3 challengers that are introduced, each one claiming to be a certain individual, but only one of them truly is. Then, information about this certain individual or character is read to the panelists. The panelists then ask the 3 challengers various questions about the person they're claiming to be to determine which one actually is that person. This is followed by a vote to determine who they think is telling the truth. This specific clip, which I just showed you, features a man by the name of Ed Edwards. And as you heard, Ed has quite the resume. Reformed criminal, previously on the FBI's most wanted list, who turned his whole life around and wanted to become an author and motivational speaker. Already a pretty crazy story by many metrics. But that wasn't the full story. The full story behind Ed Edwards is much darker and much more sinister.
A pair of 2s on each end, the votes are all in. Will the real Ed Edwards please stand up?
It goes without saying that at the point that Ed Edwards appeared on To Tell the Truth, he had already had quite the background. In 1955, he escaped from a jail in Akron and drifted around robbing gas stations. He made no attempt to hide his identity during this time because he, quote, wanted to be famous. After committing various crimes of this nature, in 1961, 6 years later, he found himself on the FBI's most wanted list after he escaped from another jail, this time in Portland, Oregon, after impersonating a federal officer. 1 year later, he was apprehended and incarcerated in the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth. It was here in Leavenworth that Edwards met a guard who he claims helped him reform his whole mindset and turned him into a better person. He was paroled in 1967, and after that he got married, had a daughter, and became a motivational speaker. This occupation as a motivational speaker led to him appearing on various television shows, one of them, the competition show To Tell the Truth. This is the back of the book summary of Ed Edwards. However, it doesn't even scratch the surface of who Ed Wayne Edwards truly was. Because for one person, the stories about Ed Edwards just didn't sit right. For one person, the Ed Edwards they knew was capable of much more heinous crimes than what was being presented on stage and on television. And that person was Ed's own daughter, April.
I had been to 16 different schools throughout from starting kindergarten through my senior year. So I truly believe almost every place that we lived, my dad killed someone. Because every place we lived, we talked about someone being killed.
In addition to all the other crimes that he committed, Ed Edwards was a serial killer. And when all the information would finally come out, Edwards had quite the long list of victims. In 1977, Edwards shot a couple, William Lavico, 21 years old, and Judith Straub, 18 years old, at point-blank range in a parking lot. In 1980, Edwards stabbed and strangled another 19-year-old couple, Tim Hack and Kelly Drew. Although he was actually questioned in regards to these murders, known at the time as the Sweetheart murders, they didn't have anything substantial linking him to the killing. In 1996, Edwards killed his own foster son, 25-year-old Danny Boy Edwards, in order to collect insurance money. He persuaded his foster son to go AWOL from the army, took him into the woods near their home, and shot him twice in the face. If Edwards' seeming MO of killing couples seems somewhat familiar to another set of crimes that occurred around the same time, don't worry, we'll get to that. But first, how was it that Edwards got caught? His own daughter aided police in bringing him to justice. In the spring of 2009, after being married and having a family of her own, April started to reflect on some of her father's odd behavior all throughout her childhood. His bursts of anger, the frequency at which they would move, sometimes in the middle of the night, her father's obsession with collecting news clippings about local murders. All the pieces seemed to point to one conclusion. She just needed to dig to find some clear evidence. Slowly, she started searching unsolved homicides in the cities they lived. And when she stumbled upon an article describing the Sweetheart murders of Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, April knew instantly her father was involved. It was at this moment that she remembered that her father worked as a handyman at the Concord House, which was a wedding reception hall, which was the last known spot that Tim and Kelly were seen before they were brutally murdered. This triggered April to contact authorities and tip them off that her father was the one responsible for the Sweetheart murders, and a few weeks later, after some DNA testing, they confirmed Ed Edwards was the killer. And once he was arrested in 2009, he would admit to 3 other murders.
Lived with some foster parents on the other side of town in Burton. And he was 21 when he graduated from high school, when he went to school with my kids. He got, the people there got divorced. And so he ended up living with one of the kids that he used to be there. And so anyways, that kid brought him to me one day. He said, I'm gonna put him out on the streets in Chardon if you don't want him. He said, because we don't want him. So we took him in and let him live there. And then it was after I started plotting down the road to kill him for the insurance purposes and everything, that we had his name changed to Danny Boy Edwards and that, but he was not a foster son, he was not an adopted son, he was someone that we had taken in. With Danny, I saw an opportunity to, I was always a schemer. I was always thinking of ways of making money. I've always been into crime. And with Danny, I saw an opportunity here to long range. It took about a year to set it up. And that's what I did. I set it up to collect the money and ended up getting $250,000 out of it. And it was arranged, it was premeditated, it was thought out, it was planned. And that's what I did. He went AWOL. I sent him the money. He got the money, he got a Greyhound. He went AWOL and went to Columbus, the bus station in Columbus. That's where I went, and that's where I picked him up at, is the bus station in Columbus. He didn't come here. Then I brought him back to the house. And he stayed at our house unbeknown to my wife. He was out in the barn, he was in the car that was parked there. He was in the house. And it was all set up. I'd already had prior to him going into the military, he took out a $50,000 insurance policy, named us beneficiary. And then while in the military...
Did you ask him to do that? Or he did it voluntarily?
No, I asked him to, but...
But that was part of your plan then?
That was part of my plan, yes. That started back prior to him going into the military. Then the name change was not effective, was not all the way through yet once he went into the military. When he went into the military, he was Danny Glockner. It was while he was in basic training that the name change went through to Danny Boy Edwards. So at that time he had to go down and change his name on the records to the insurance policy, because the insurance policy had been made out to the people that he used to live with that already separated and everything, and Matter of fact, one of them was dead. And so he went down and changed his policy over and named my wife and I the beneficiaries. And he was going to get a medical discharge from the Army because he couldn't handle it. But it was about 3 days prior to that, and that's when I talked him into going AWOL, because they said he was going to Korea, and he didn't want to go to Korea. So I talked him into going AWOL, or told him to. He did what I told him. And we went to Columbus. I picked him up in Columbus, brought him back here. And then that was part of the scheme that I put together, and it was, okay, I'm talking to him as to, we're going to make a phone call that he burglarized the house and stole money and different things like that. And so then when he had it memorized and everything, I took him down to Ladue and dropped him off, telephone. I went back home and he called me. It was being recorded. Hi, Pops, how are you? And we talked, and I'm sorry I burglarized the house and things like that. I said, well, I didn't know you were even in here, Danny. And yeah, and so we went all through that, and that he gives the money to another person. And so then it ended, so I went back and picked him up and brought him back to the house. And it was the next night, I think it was the next night, that he ended up losing his life up behind the cemetery, because I told him that there was a fellow in Youngstown that was going to come by, pick him up, and hide him out for a couple of months, and then he would be clear. He wouldn't have to worry about anything. He believed all this, and it was up there that where he died, and I had the body partially covered.
Now, there isn't going to be much pausing and commentary added to these clips because they are fairly straightforward, but let's just take a moment to point out a few things. Number one, the very casual nature with which Edwards discusses the plotting and murder of his foster son. He speaks about this as casually as one would speak about doing a project around the house. This is eerily reminiscent of many serial killer confessions. Calm, matter-of-fact, collected. Killers such as Dennis Rader and Ted Bundy are perfect examples of this.
Once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of material. Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement, until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. You reach that jumping off point where you begin to wonder if maybe actually doing it will give you that which is beyond just reading about it or looking at it.
What I call a haunt, as I call it. I have special appeal to it. I've been there, I started knowing the roads, I knew the people. I drive by, watch cars, people pull out of their homes, and people go, wrote telephone numbers down, wrote addresses down. This is how it really started, right here, is by haunts. That area, the Edgemore area, was my first big haunt.
The other interesting thing to point out here is that how, despite him being arrested and in the midst of a confession to all of these crimes, it's clear he's still trying to mentally disassociate from what he did. You'll notice that up to this point, he rarely speaks of murder in the first person, and rarely attributes it to himself at all. He has no problem talking about how he was the one who planned and plotted, he was the one who contacted Danny. But when it comes time to talk about the actual murder, he says phrases like, "That's where he lost his life," or "That's where he died," still attempting to psychologically distance himself from the act.
And kept it that way. I went back up there about every 3 or 4 months to check, because I wanted the body found, but not immediately, but I didn't want to bury it either. So I left it partially covered. And the one time, it was about a year later, when I went up to check on it, the head had been separated from the body due to the animals and everything. And I took it with me and took it across the street, threw it up into the field. And the police and everything, they've been looking for it, but they can't find it. It was nothing but the skull. They've been unable to find it. But there was a hunter that found Danny, and And the rest of the story, everybody knows it, where he was found and why, but that was set up. And after he was found, it was, I'm not sure, maybe a year later, maybe not as much as a year, that I collected $250,000 from the investigation, but the attorney representing me, and he got a third of this, so the rest of it we got. And my wife, she was not aware of any of this. I endorsed all the paperwork and forged her name, and she knew absolutely nothing. She's a very Christian-like woman.
Where did the additional, you said it was original, was a $50,000 policy. Where did the other $200,000, did he take out an additional policy?
No, when you go in the military, you can have different amounts they give you, and it comes out of your pay, and he was covered with $200,000 military.
Let's go back to this 1977. You killed Judith Straub and Bill Levecko at close range, and they were in Akron. They were in Akron area, couple.
In Norton.
Why? You didn't even know them, did you?
Oh yes, I knew him very well. Knew him very well, and had told him on different occasions that if he did not stop making eyes and fooling around with my small children and being around them, that he was going to end up getting hurt. And after about the fourth or fifth time I explained that to him, I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you something, Bill, I'm going to kill you if you do it one more time. And it just so happened that Judith was a prostitute. When we used to go uptown now I can't think of it, right up in Wayne County.
You were downtown in Akron there, that way?
No, we were living in Wayne County, right out Route 21. I can't think of the name of the little town up there. But we used to go up there and shoot pool and everything, and she'd be out in the car making money with prostitution and stuff like that. Well, I did not expect her to be with him this particular night. She was. It was dark. She did not recognize me. I know she didn't. And I told her to stay in the car. I wanted to talk to him. And I said, please, because it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And Doylestown was where we were living. This happened. And so I was over there with Bill, talking to him, telling him that, and then she insisted to be there. She got out of the car, come on over, and then at that time, Bill told her, says, look, Wayne, there's $500 in her purse in the car. If you want money, why don't you just get it? I said, Bill, do you know what you just did? And at that moment, I shot him and killed him. What he just did was tell her who I was. And she started to run. I told her to stop. I wasn't going to shoot her or kill her, because I only had a single gauge shotgun. She come back. By the time I had another one I put in, and I shot her, but I didn't threaten her. Tell her I was going to say I didn't even give reasons for him. There was no threats. There was no pleading and things like this here.
Okay, what happened with Kelly Drew and Tim Hack in Jefferson, Wisconsin? That was rape, right?
That was what?
Rape?
Hell no, it wasn't rape. I've never raped anybody.
Well, they found semen.
No.
Despite Edwards vehemently denying the fact that he assaulted Kelly Drew, and the somewhat convoluted story he tells afterwards to try to explain this away, there was quite a bit of evidence to suggest that an assault took place. Which leads to another interesting point regarding the behavior of Edwards and other similar killers. While they can talk freely and openly about the murders they committed, Sometimes, certain acts go against even what they are comfortable to admitting, leading to a sort of cognitive dissonance. He will openly admit to killing at least 5 people in great detail, but of course, he would never sexually assault anyone. He's so far above that. How dare you even make that accusation?
First of all, the girl and I, Kelly, we knew each other. Okay, I was doing work up there at the where the dance hall and the bar and everything are at, and doing carpentry work and rebuilding. My son was helping me, but we lived about 3 or 4 miles away in a farmhouse that we had rented, and Kelly and I had been together. It was a wedding reception, and the boy, the man, he was inside. He was arguing over a tractor. He was into tractors, tractor pulls and expensive tractors. He was in there arguing, and she didn't want to hear it. She came on out, and I was out in the bars right next door. We went on over to the car, and we had our fun.
Sexually?
Yes. And she went on back, and as she went around the corner to go into the reception hall where he was coming out, and they started arguing. And this arguing, it progressed, a couple 100 feet down toward the end of the building, and now there's no lights down there or anything. And he had pushed her. And so I had walked over. And at that time, it was kind of obvious to him that I was the reason why he didn't know where she was. And he pushed her again, she went down, and I hit him in the neck, very hard. I was a husky man then, and we're talking about 1980. And in the neck here, the rabbit punch. But anyways, he went down, and he stayed down. And I'm bent over to see her. I mean, because I didn't mean, my intent was not to kill him. It was just get him off of her and get him away from me. Well, as it worked out, then she started piling on me, and she's talking about he's dead, and she started smacking me and everything, so I ended up choking her right there, and that's where they both died. But I didn't leave them there. I pulled them back away from any body, because there was nothing there. It was all cows and everything out in there, and woods. And I went down, not the front way, but around the back way, got my van, brought it back around the back way, put them in the van, and drove off and exposed them in a cornfield. Now, she was not raped, and that's how that came about.
But you had sex with her?
Yeah, I had sex with her on 5 or 6 occasions.
Okay. Wasn't there a better way to deal with that situation? Explain to police that he had attacked you and you had acted in self-defense?
No. When I first of all was having sex with her, I had a family, had 5 children, and
you were cheating on your wife and your family.
Yes. And I had a record from way back. Nothing there, but then I also had that double murder there in Norton they didn't know about. But no, that was for my lifestyle and everything. No, I just killed 2 people. No way in hell was I about to call the police out, because I wasn't from there, and I'd have been convicted.
Edwards was eventually sentenced to death. Another interesting piece of media concerning Edwards was a 2010 prison interview in which he spoke briefly about his death sentence and how he feels about it.
40 years.
I haven't thought about it. Truth of the matter is, it's only been the last, 6 or 7 years that I've given any thought to any of it. I just didn't think of it. Because you hear a lot of people say, well, conscience will get the best of you. I just didn't think of it. It didn't bother me.
Did you ever think you'd ever get...
This one here in Geauga County, it was in effect 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and I certainly deserve it. I certainly deserve it. And I have no qualm whatsoever about going down there and letting them... now, if they still had electrocution, I might change my way of thinking. But I have no qualm about them putting a needle in my arm. And as a matter of fact, they took blood today, and it can't hurt as much as that did.
Well, you know that the death penalty...
I deserve it, yes.
Did you offer any apologies to any of your victims' families?
Oh, that's for me to say. I wouldn't. Oh no, naturally. I'm sorry and everything, but I'm not going to stand up and beat myself on the chest. And certainly, I'm not going to. I'm not going to get up in court and apologize and things like this. It's already that there is. I believe that would be an insult to injury.
While it's true that an apology to the families might mean very little given the time and circumstances, it's still interesting to see how aggressively Edwards shrugs off even the idea of apologizing, despite moments earlier repeatedly talking about how he deserved death and punishment. This is explained by a true lack of remorse on the part of Edwards for the crimes he committed.
I believe that would be an insult to injury for me to stand up in court and say, I'm sorry I killed your daughter or your son or your relatives. I'm sorry. That's wrong. That's wrong.
Why is it wrong?
It's just, I believe you're insulting them. I mean, I think my actions are speaking loud that I am sorry. Okay, and they're going to have an impact statement against me, and I'm going to sit there and whatever they have to say, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take whatever they have to say, and and let them say it. I deserve it, but at the same time, I'm not going to get up and if I felt that bad about it, I wouldn't have done it to start with. I just.
Ed, the thing about you that I do...
Leavenworth and Lewisburg and everything, I went straight, and my intention. Don't ask me where I went wrong. My intent, please, my intent was, the criminologist at the University of Akron suggested I write that book. And it was my intent never, ever, ever to get back into crime again. That was my intent. So much for good intentions.
So much for good intentions, indeed. On April 7, 2011, Ed Edwards died of natural causes while in the Corrections Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio, avoiding his August 31st execution date. But although Edwards is dead, questions around his crimes still remain. Primarily, how many murders really were there? The detective who was in charge of investigating the Sweetheart murders speculates there may have been 5 to 7 more murders committed by Edwards. And one of the most pervasive theories, especially given Edwards' penchant for killing couples, was the theory that Edwards may have been the infamous Zodiak Killer. While some subscribe to this theory, others point out one big hole. That being that there's no way to confirm that Ed Edwards spent as much time in the San Francisco Bay Area as would have been required for him to commit all of the murders that they attributed to the Zodiac Killer. So all said and done, a serial killer was brought to justice, even if it took decades. However, the true extent of his crimes may never truly be known, and had it not been for his daughter April, who knows when Edwards truly would have been caught. And if we were to walk away with something after analyzing this case, I suppose it would be this. You don't really know anyone, but trust your gut, because sometimes it'll lead you to the truth.